everyone, and welcome back to another interview with an author. Today I am featuring one of my best friends, and that is Audrey Bodine, who is the author of 18 Days of Christmas. 18 Days of Christmas is a really sweet holiday-themed novella, and Audrey is just a really sweet friend of mine. I have known her now for going on a couple of years. We are best friends. We have a little group chat. We chat all the time. I could chat about her the whole day away, but I'm going to go ahead and get into the author interview about her self-publishing experience. Hello, Audrey, and thank you so much for agreeing to be a part of Self-Published Saturdays. I am so happy to have you on my channel, and I'm so excited that we finally get to collaborate on something. So why don't you go ahead and tell everyone about what you do, who you are, and of course, the wonderful book that you've written, 18 Days of Christmas.
Hey, I'm Audrey Bodine. I write contemporary Christian fiction that I consider the literary version of your favorite rom-coms. Well, I'm not equating my books to your favorites list. I just mean the feelings that you get from watching your favorite rom-coms are hopefully the same that you would get from reading one of my books. I want people to know that whenever they pick up a book by me, they can expect a fun and clean read that shares a deeper message of God's love and how He works in our lives. I have published one book, 18 Days of Christmas. This is the first book in a series that centers around a family named the Cadens. The Cadens own a bookstore chain that's similar to Barnes & Noble or Mardel's or Lifeway. It's Christian-based, but it has a bunch of like textbooks and travel guides and stuff. You probably don't need to know what they stock. But anyway, imagine like Lifeway or Mardel's. There are 4 siblings in the Caden family, and each book will center on a different sibling. This first one centered on the second oldest brother named Beckett, who is a single father that takes his daughter Holly to a lodge during December in hopes of renewing her love of Christmas. Throughout the story, Beckett encounters the granddaughter of the lodge owners, and suffice it to say they don't get along at first, or in the middle. It's a process, but eventually, without spoiling anything, they do find a friendship and they really grow from their relationship with each other. Currently, I'm working on the second book in the series, which follows the oldest brother, RJ. Now, the plot has changed a couple times before I've even written the draft, so I'm not going to say too much in case it changes again, but what you can expect from this one is RJ to be in a small town in Minnesota, a female protagonist named Lauren, and a month spent in a bookstore that will change their lives forever. That's not the tagline, but I hope it interests you.
What made you choose to be an independently published author and specifically to write Christian fiction?
I started to seriously consider publishing in 2018 while I was working on a manuscript that I thought at the time would be my debut novel. For a variety of reasons, it was not. But it is what pushed me into the world of Christian fiction reading and writing. I started my platforms on Instagram and Facebook. Platform seems like a weird word, but that's what it is. I started my account, and I started looking into the pros and cons of both traditional and independent publishing. For my purposes and my preferences, I preferred independent publishing. I really liked the freedom that independent publishing offered. I got to be the cover designer, I got to have the last word on the content that was in the book itself, I got to market the book however I wanted. While these are some of the things that drew me to indie publishing, these are also some of the biggest disadvantages. The reason that I write Christian fiction specifically is because that is what God has laid on my heart to do. I want to significantly write Him into all steps of the book. I don't think that my style of writing Jesus and scripture into a novel is the only way to do things by any means. There are plenty of great and classic books that don't even mention God by name, and I think that's fantastic. It's just my personal preference is to have it more under the category of inspirational fiction, where God is intertwined very evidently into the story. It's sort of hard to explain, but whenever I read Christian fiction or inspirational fiction, it settles my spirit in a way, because I know that everything that I'm enjoying, from the jokes to the relationships to anything else. It honors God, and I am reminded of some of God's greatest attributes: His provision, His love, the redemption that we find in Jesus. It's refreshing because in a world where things are so often not reflective of the good attributes of Jesus, you find a whole fictional world, yes, but true reminders of how magnificent and forgiving God is.
What are your goals as an indie CF author? Have you accomplished any of those goals?
I would love to hold a book signing someday. The people that I have met virtually through all of the social media platforms are the best part of the writing journey. And I think it would be really fun, and I would totally love to meet them in person someday and just talk about books and talk about characters, because really that is a great way to spend a day, in my opinion. Other than that, I'm just looking forward to all the adventures that I can't anticipate that God has planned for me.
What is one thing about self-publishing that you wish you would have known before you started?
I wish that I would have known to take my time. I wrote and published my first book within, I think it was 2 months. In doing that, I sped up a lot of the parts of the process that could have been more finely tuned, and I could have presented a more refined version of my book. Looking back, while there are things that I could have done better if I had spent more time on certain parts, I also realized that it was a learning experience. I saw firsthand what was specifically involved in speeding up the process and what was affected by that, and that grew my experience, and I can use that for future books to spend more time on one aspect rather than another. One thing that I've repeatedly learned, even after my book was published, is that it is never going to be perfect. And at some point you have to accept that God has a purpose for this story that you may never realize, and maybe it's just for one person out there who will connect with it, who will start asking questions about Him. You never know what the purpose of your story is. You can try and figure it out, and you can spend a lot of time refining it to be its best version, but it'll never be perfect, and that's okay. It's not supposed to be. It's just supposed to be your heart's work and your attempt to glorify God in your writing and your abilities. No matter what, whether you traditionally publish or independently publish, God will use all of it, the mistakes you make and the successes you have, to grow you.
How much of the work did you outsource? I would especially love to hear about your title design and illustration experience, because I know a little bit about that already, but you're just so talented, and I think that's something that really makes you very unique as an indie author.
The only thing that I outsourced for 18 Days of Christmas was the title design. My sister has amazing abilities with hand lettering, and she owns her own online shop called Hello Darling Papery, and I knew that she could do the title much better than I could. I did design the cover myself. I've had a lot of experience with drawing and digital art for a while, and I knew that if I did it myself, it would be less expensive, and I would be able to do it exactly how I wanted it. To actually create the cover, I used an app called Procreate, and I sketched out the main idea that I had. When I was inspired to write this story, I knew 2 central things that I built pretty much the whole story on, even though one of them doesn't seem as prominent in the story whenever you read the final version. I knew that there would be a lodge, and I knew that my female protagonist, Elise, loved winter Christmas village pieces. For the cover, I combined those 2 parts, and I drew what the lodge would look like as a village piece. Then, when I knew the characters better, and after I had some clothing choices mentioned in the book specifically, I drew them as little figurines outside of the lodge.
What platform or platforms did you use to indie publish 18 Days, and what was that process like? How did that look? Was it pretty user-friendly, or did you have to do a lot of trial and error and learn from different tutorials and things?
I published 18 Days on 2 different platforms. One was Barnes & Noble's Press self-publishing platform, and the other was Amazon's Kindle Direct Publishing. These were both great options for me. I would say that KDP is a little bit more user-friendly. Amazon has laid it out because they know that, these are going to be people who usually don't have a lot of experience formatting or uploading manuscripts, so they've made it very user-friendly, and it's great. Barnes & Noble Press is a little bit more complicated, but it's still very user-friendly. I keep saying that, but it's the only term that I can think of. My personal process was kind of complicated because I didn't know what to expect, and once I was in the middle of it, I didn't exactly know what I was doing. It was a learning experience, definitely, but it wasn't super difficult. It just took time. It took a couple days for me to figure out formatting. The process of formatting can be much easier if you use a different program than I did, because mine wasn't made to format things. I learned a lot, so I know what to do in the future, which is nice.
Would you recommend doing it this way? And what have you learned about these aspects of self-publishing through your experience? Do you have any sage words of advice that you would potentially pass on to others who are about to go through a similar experience?
This was a great way for me to self-publish, and I would totally recommend it, but I also know that it's not the only way to self-publish. If you're willing to put in the financial investment, I know that other authors recommend Ingram Spark. I learned that you really need to allot more time than you think you will for pretty much any aspect of self-publishing. You're never going to know for sure that things are going to go off without a hitch, and there will be unforeseen obstacles that pop up. Whether this is formatting, editing, people don't get back to you in reviewing in the time that you set out, or Amazon doesn't upload your manuscript immediately. That's actually something that I learned. Amazon has to check your manuscript, which I'm still not sure exactly what that means, but it usually takes 24 to 48 hours for the paperback version. So if you want to publish it on a certain day, you have to allow for that time. There are all kinds of things that can go wrong or can just take longer than expected. And if you give yourself more room than you need, you'll be better off.
What resources did you learn from when you were preparing to self-publish? Did you read any books or do any tutorials? Do you have any favorite writing craft books or channels or anything like that?
The biggest resource, I think, whenever I was learning to indie publish was people. I talked to some authors who had already independently published, or I watched YouTube videos of people in the industry. I learned a lot from just watching videos and asking questions. Don't be afraid to reach out to people who are established or who are establishing themselves, because a lot of people in the bookish community are very willing to help. They love to give out what knowledge they can. On the software application side of things, Scrivener was a key player for me. I fully formatted in Scrivener, which is not something that I would definitely recommend unless you're willing to put in the time to figure out how to do it, because that app is fantastic and I would definitely recommend it for writing your book, but it wasn't made for every aspect of publishing.
What is your favorite aspect of being a self-published author, and what do you think you would say is the hardest aspect of being a self-published author?
I really love that as an indie author, I get to set my own schedule. Since I don't have a contractual obligation, I get to write on my own timetable and completely restructure a plot if I need to. One of the hardest aspects of self-publishing is being the final word on everything in the book. While it's great to be in charge, it also gives you a lot of responsibility. You are in charge of presenting the best possible version of your book in every aspect, from the cover to the interior formatting to the character development, the content, everything. It's on your shoulders to make sure that everything goes as smoothly as possible. In order to produce the best possible version of your work, which is what you want, you sometimes have to step outside of your comfort zone. I had to reach out to people who would read my book and review it. That's not always easy to do as an author. You'll find new experiences and encounter new opportunities and obstacles that you wouldn't as a traditionally published author, but the same is true. You will encounter opportunities if you decide to go traditionally.
Do you have a kind of support system or any brainstorm groups or potentially a she-wolf pack? Wink, wink. How have those groups and friends and family members that you've made through this experience helped you in your journey and encouraged you as you've written your books, published them, and then continued to write more?
I have a wonderful support system. My family and my parents especially have been, they've been there for the whole journey, literally. They have always supported me, and they've watched over my writing and helped me refine it. And I also have great friends who have been there since the beginning. One of my friends actually gave me a bouquet of flowers on release day, it just made my day. Outside of family and longtime friends, I have also been introduced to a great community on Instagram and Facebook. I've met some great people through that. I don't know if you've read Anne of Green Gables, but there is a relationship between the main character Anne and her best friend Diana, and she calls them kindred spirits. And I have found two kindred spirits through this author journey. One is our lovely host of this series, Jenna Van Mourik, and the other is a book reviewer named Alicia at For the Love of Christian Fiction. They are two of the kindest and warmest people that I have ever met, and they love Christian fiction as much or even more than I do. And we've bonded over that, and we have a group message that is called the She-Wolf Pack, which if you watch Fuller House, you'll understand. And they have become two of not only my bookish friends, but two of my closest and dearest friends. They let me bounce ideas off of them and vice versa. They make every story better just by giving me encouragement and the advice that they do.
18 Days of Christmas was your first published book, but not the first story that you've ever written. Do you have any thoughts on that or advice for first-time authors or writers? Because I know your experience was pretty interesting to have a book that you thought was going to be your debut, and then you ended up thinking, maybe not. Maybe I should try this again. So what was that like, and was it hard to kind of let go and move on from that first draft or that first story?
I see what you did there, Jenna. I think part of the reason Jenna included this question is because she's one of the few people who have read the story that I was working on before 18 Days of Christmas. I mentioned it earlier as the work that I thought would be my debut novel, but for a variety of reasons it wasn't. A large part of that was because it had plot holes that I didn't see, and it had problems with character development that I was oblivious to, and that can happen very easily as the writer. You don't see things because you're so immersed in the story, you already know everything that happens. But when you ask for feedback on the book, you'll have people who have never encountered this world. They don't know why this person doesn't like this person or why they assume this thing about the world. Getting feedback from other people who don't know your story as intimately as you do can be very helpful because they'll see the plot holes or the character development issues that you don't see, and it's a very necessary step in my opinion. So take your time, get feedback from people that you trust, and be willing to adjust your writing and the story to the kind but honest critiques.
We've recently passed the holiday season and your 1 year mark or 1 year anniversary since publishing 18 Days of Christmas. Do you have any reflections on the past year of being a debut author and any goals for the next year?
It's really strange that it's already been a year. My reflection would be that 2019 was a year of change, but in good ways that grew me up a lot. And my goals for 2020 are to finish the second book in the Caden Christmas series and to start an author newsletter.
What is it like seeing people post or talk about your book, whether that's through social media, reviews on Amazon, or blog posts, or even in YouTube videos? And what has been your proudest moment as an author seeing your book out there in the world?
It's always a bit surreal to see people holding my book and seeing it in someone else's home. One of the proudest moments I have had as an author was when I read my first review. Now, this may seem scripted because I'm on Jenna's channel, but it just so happened that Jenna was the first one to finish my book and review it. And after I finished reading her review of it, I couldn't stop smiling, and I bolted to the room where my parents were, and I handed my dad my phone, and he read it out loud for my mom and I. And it's one of my favorite memories just in general, because these were the two people who had seen me grow up, who had seen my writing grow, who had helped develop my writing, and sharing that with them, the kind of fruition of all of our hard work. It's a very good memory.
Your book and your writing style is full of so much wit and humor and just hilarious things that happen and just great one-liners. But I'm curious if there is any funny story or humorous anecdote that you can recall that you experienced related to 18 days, whether that was during the writing process, the publishing process, or post-publication. It can really be anything.
A memory that came to mind when I was trying to answer this question, it happened right after my mom finished reading my book for the first time. I was in my room doing something, and she came around the door jamb, holding my book to her chest, with this big grin on her face, and she said, "Well, I just finished your book. Is RJ's story next?" And when I told her that I was, she got really excited and said, "I knew it!" And I love that memory because my mom is one of the most important people in my life, and she has probably more than anyone seen my early stages of writing, and so I really wanted her to love my book and my story, and I was excited that she was excited.
Finally, thank you so much for sticking it all the way through this interview. Can you give us any hints on future Caden Christmases? How will your writing process change going forward? How might our favorite characters change? How might Elise and Beckett change? I need clues. I need breadcrumbs. Tell me everything.
As I said earlier, I am planning on writing 4 books in this series, and each one follows a different sibling of the Caden family. I'm going to write them so that they can each be read as a standalone, but you'll get the full effect of the family relations if you read them in order. There will be plenty of cameos of the main characters and their significant others from previous books. So if you miss some characters, you'll probably see them in a scene or two. I can't say exactly what's going to happen in character development of side characters or even main characters, because I have learned that oftentimes I do not see the character development coming or the plot twist coming, so I can't really tell you what to expect. My writing process changes from book to book a little bit, and it grows because I become more comfortable in my writing, and I learn what works and what doesn't, and how deep to go into my outline. The more I build up this world and these characters, the more I have to draw on in the future, which makes it both easier and longer to write the outline of a book sometimes, because I have to factor in, oh right, I mentioned this in this one story, so I can't contradict that now, but I also have a lot to draw on. Oh, I mentioned this, so now I can expound on that. As for the characters, I don't want to give too much away, and like I said, I don't always know what's going to happen, so even if I told you, it might not happen in the end. I will say that by book 4, I think there will have been at least 1 wedding and 1 new addition to the family. No matter what, you can expect plenty of family escapades of the Cadens, with humor and love and hopefully wit, but always a message of God's redemption and love and provision.
Thank you so much, Audrey, for being such a huge supporter of me and for also agreeing to be a part of Self-Published Saturdays. It was such a joy to have you on my channel, and it was a joy to work with you. I really appreciated how much creativity and thought you put into your answers, so thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. If you guys want to say thank you to Audrey, then be sure you go ahead and check out all of her links and information in the description box below. All the stuff and information about her website, books, social media will all be down there, so make sure you guys go ahead and check that out so that you can give her some support and encouragement as she goes about publishing the rest of her books, because guys, Audrey's gonna go far. If you don't know who I am, my name is Jenna Van Mourik. I am a yet-to-be-published biblical fiction author, and I'm also a reviewer of biblical fiction and Christian fiction alike. If you like bookish videos and fun bookish content, then be sure you subscribe to this YouTube channel, because that's what I post every week, in addition to these author interview videos. I'm also active on social media, so that's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all of that, pretty much every single day, so be sure you guys go ahead and check out the links down in the description box below, because they'll have all of that information for you guys to check out. You can find more information about me, my book club, and all the things that I offer to readers and writers on my website at authorjennavanmourik.com. Don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed it and want to see more content like this. And don't forget to subscribe if this is your first time around here. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much for enjoying this interview. I hope you learned something. I hope it encouraged you and inspired you in your own writing journey and maybe even in your own faith journey and your walk with God. Once again, my name is Jenna Van Mourik, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!